Thanks on behalf of the team for allowing us to present the first findings from this longitudinal study of pelvic floor dysfunction 26 years after childbirth, funded by the Chief Scientist's Office in Scotland. I have no disclosures to make. We know from previous research, including our own, that pelvic floor dysfunction is prevalent after childbirth, but there are few studies that have looked at this longitudinally, following the same women up over time. In the prolonged study, we recruited almost 8,000 women, both primiparous and multiparous women, who gave birth in 1993 and 94 in 3 centres: Aberdeen, Birmingham and Dunedin. We followed these women up at 6 and 12 years later in all 3 centres. We have now completed the 26-year follow-up of women in the 2 UK centres and have conducted preliminary analysis. As at previous time points, data were collected using a postal questionnaire, and we included the same core questions as previously for consistency. We asked women about their symptoms in the last 4 weeks, and the questions you see here were used to determine prevalence of urinary incontinence, faecal incontinence and symptomatic prolapse. (5,285) questionnaires were sent out to women in the UK cohort starting in November 2019. A response rate of 35% was achieved after 1 reminder. The median length of follow-up for the responders was 26 years, and the average age of the women when they replied was 56 years of age. The average age when they first gave birth was 28 years, and the median number of births was 2. The average BMI at 26 years was 27, placing the women in the overweight category. Compared to the UK women who did not respond at 26 years, either because they had been lost to follow-up at that time point or had not returned the 26-year questionnaire, responders were slightly older when they had given birth and were first recruited, and more likely to have reported urinary incontinence postnatally. For analysis purposes, consistent with our analyses at previous time points, we grouped women into the following 5 independent categories describing their delivery mode history. Almost half the respondents had exclusively spontaneous vaginal deliveries, with no caesarean section or instrumental assistance. The next largest group was those who had had at least 1 forceps delivery, 23%. And the smallest group was exclusive caesarean section deliveries at 5%. For the whole group of responders, 61% reported urine leakage in the last 4 weeks, and for 38% this was moderate to very severe. 22% reported being incontinent of faeces, and 17% reported a feeling of something coming down in the vagina. The mean POP-SS score was 3.2 out of a possible 28, which indicates a low level of symptoms similar to that we would see in a non-treatment seeking population. Comparing this to prevalence at the 12-year time point, both urinary incontinence and faecal incontinence percentages are higher at 26 years. In both cases, the difference between time points appears to be due to a higher prevalence for those in the any forceps and any vacuum groups. The prevalence of something coming down and the POP-SS mean score was similar at 12 and 26 years. When we look at prevalence of pelvic floor dysfunction at 26 years by delivery mode history, there is a similar pattern for UI, FI and something coming down, as you see here in the 3 graphs. In each case, the lowest prevalence was for women who had had only caesarean section births. The highest prevalences were for either the any vacuum or any forceps group. For urinary incontinence and something coming down, the difference between delivery mode history groups was significant on a chi-square test. A similar pattern was also observed in the POP-SS mean score, which was lowest for only caesarean section births and highest for any forceps, but with no significant difference between the groups. To summarise, we found that urinary incontinence was the most common pelvic floor dysfunction, with over 60% of women reporting this problem at 26 years. For From our analysis to date, we can conclude that rates of UI and FI observed at 26 years were higher than at 12-year follow-up, but prolapse prevalence, in particular the symptom of something coming down, was similar at both time points. The percentage reporting UI, FI or something coming down was lowest for those who had delivered only by caesarean section compared to the other delivery mode history categories. These women also had the lowest mean POP-SS score. This is work in progress and further analysis is ongoing. Specifically, we are undertaking an adjusted analysis of the 26-year outcomes to take account of a number of important covariates. We also want to investigate further the effect of non-response on our findings using external health data linked to women in the cohort who did and did not respond. We will look at moderate to very severe UI as an additional outcome to any urinary incontinence. And finally, we will of course combine data from all follow-up time points for UK and New Zealand to do a complete longitudinal analysis of this birth cohort. Thank you for listening, and we look forward to answering your questions.